Shift Happens podcast.
Welcome to the Shift Happens podcast, where we explore the latest trends and technologies transforming the future of work. Today, we're joined by Ahikam Kaufman, CEO of Safebooks AI. With a proven track record in financial technology, Ahikam now leads Safebooks in its mission to empower organizations to achieve total confidence in their financial data. We'll explore how AI can help improve data accuracy, spot potential fraud before it becomes a problem, and keep finance teams aligned with changing regulations. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Shift Happens podcast. Today, I'm so excited because we get to talk to an expert in financial services using AI to make sure that anything related to financial is in a good shape, especially with the growth of AI. And also, there's a lot of issues and challenges that people are dealing with. So with that, welcome to the show, Ahikam.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Awesome. So before we jump right into it, we ask all of our guests what their favorite song is, because this is a part of the Shift Happens podcast where we call the soundtrack of Shift. So think about all the changes that's going on, all the transformation. What song do you believe that best exemplifies what we're experiencing now and why?
So, the song I chose is a song that was created by U2. I still haven't found out. I'm looking for. And I'd like to think the song talks about the aspiration for a better tomorrow, for a better future, and the seek for that. I remember when U2 came out with the album Joshua Tree. I was in high school and I was overwhelmed. I was in a friend's house. He played the record. I actually owned the original record. So maybe it's my bad. I should have bought it, but I actually own the original record, and I'd like to think all the songs in that record were fabulous. And then I had to go and visit the Joshua Tree Park near LA on I-10. It's interesting that I heard many years after Bono and this entire band, which remained very, I think, down to earth. They've done remarkably well. They did a lot of humanitarian projects and things like that. He also invested in tech, Bono. I think he was involved in one of the funds in San Francisco. So to me, it connects the dot. But I think it's they talk about a better tomorrow. We aspire for a better tomorrow.
So you feel like, by the way, U2 is my favorite band. So when I heard that, that's awesome. The part I think I love most, I think, is the second verse where it says, I've run, I've crawled, I've scaled these city walls, right? These city walls, only to be with you. But it's not there yet. So I feel like with all these changes in tech, be it the mobile technologies, cloud, AI, we're always aspiring, right? This could be it. We're going to go hard, but then there's something else that's coming. So that's how I see these changes are. And then it's very hopeful for what the future looks like.
Yeah, definitely. I'd like also to think that the current is changing in a faster pace than before. I'd like to think that today you can build companies much faster. You can build technologies much faster. And our need as entrepreneurs or business people to remain current with what's going on in the market. I think 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you can read the paper once a month or once a quarter, and it's still going to be pretty much the same. Now, every month or even every week, things could be different, right? So I think a couple of days ago, maybe 24 hours ago, Google released its new AI. OpenAI released the new imaging stuff. Now everyone on LinkedIn are posting all the new images, right? So it's the pace is it's not even 5 years ago. It's speed of light.
That's right. I mean, imagine that feedback loop, right? Because I saw Sam Kaufman posting on Twitter X yesterday say, hey, can you hold down on image generation? Like our infrastructure is being bogged down. But that's the nature of it. And speaking of building businesses and adopting technology, boy, you have an amazing career. For those that don't know you, can you share a brief background of your journey in technology and what you're doing today and why you're doing it with Safebooks AI?
I'll try to do that very briefly. So, I started my career as a CFO in the Bay Area. And I worked in a startup that at the time we one of the issues that enterprises had was the performance of their internal network, and we created a full software based solution to measure and improve the performance of the enterprise network, and we sold it to a company called Mercury. Mercury was the first company that automated software testing. 20 years ago, for our younger listeners or watchers or viewers, 20 years ago, people would still have to budget for every couple of engineers. They would have to budget quality people that would just test software manually. And that process has completely gone automated. That was my first inspiration to what we're doing at Safebooks. The other inspiration was, so I got into Mercury and I spent 8 years or 9 years in a company that wanted to automate not just software testing, but the entire IT shop in organization. That's how they used to call it 20 years ago. During my tenure at Mercury, we grew from $180 million in revenues to 1.1 billion. And then we got acquired by Hewlett Packard. And after that, me and a friend, we decided to start a personal finance company, a consumer company. So we started that company, and the vision was to help you organize the access to all your financial accounts. We started on the web, and then the iPhone came out, and the iPhone App Store came out, and we were one of the very first applications on the iPhone. We were actually on a Steve Jobs slide, and um, and the iPhone really boosted and accelerated our kind of distribution and growth. Back then, unlike today, where you have, I think, a few millions of applications, when we started, there were only a couple of hundreds, so that was much easier to be to be discovered. And eventually, we built a full payment suite, personal finance suite, including payments, bill pay, where you would get bills automatically into our platform and you can pay them from one of your connected accounts very easily. And we were connected to 6,000 billers across the country. And we got acquired by Intuit. And at Intuit, after the integration, where I had the privilege of staying for like a few years, 5 or 6 years, we also helped them fully automate their fraud prevention. So Intuit is a very large money processor for small businesses, and leveraging the technology we developed uh, at Check, uh, we help them automate their fraud prevention for payments. And the two use cases I've seen at Mercury, automating software testing, and at Intuit, automating fraud prevention by vetting each and every transaction, coming from the office of the CFO originally, and knowing all the heavy manual um, work associated with not only obviously transacting finance, but also validating the data, I thought there must be a better way. I'd like to think that today corporate finance are way behind some of the other part of the organization, and that's what inspired me to start Safebooks.
Got it. Well, speaking of automation, right? So we can see this evolution in thread of your career. And now with Safebooks, you talk about corporate finance. I think Gen AI has a lot of potential applications from fraud detection to reporting. Where do you see the low hanging fruits are with applying AI in financial data governance, and what challenges are organizations dealing with today that they can certainly maximize the use of AI?
Yeah. So if I'll take a step back, I think the combination of AI and enterprise finance or corporate accounting requires very careful thought. And the reason is because the data is so sensitive, fully to only trust AI to be able to inject data into enterprise system, it's something that maybe we're not there yet. However, being able to leverage AI to check the data, validate the data, I think is a huge opportunity. So a way to think about it, I don't think we can fully replace accountants with automation today. We have to trust the data for business purposes, right? We can't go wrong there. And also there are very heavy compliance requirements, right? So I don't think we can fully automate all the data injections, but we can use AI to validate the data. Every company, every very large company, which is naturally audited or public company, is subject to regulation. And if it's a public company, it's a federal regulation by law that requires it to apply internal controls across its financial reporting and across its data. And the ability to use AI, like we've used it in fraud prevention, in payments, for example, to be able to vet the transactions and minimize the manual work that people are doing today in order to check the data, validate the data, and substantiate the data, that's a real opportunity from an AI standpoint. Because from one hand, you don't inject data into the systems, you don't trust AI to kind of manage your records. But from the other hand, you are leveraging the ability of AI to scan massive amount of data and identify the places where manual vetting or manual check will be required, while everything else is vetted by the systems, helping you to meet compliance requirements.
Hakeem, I was gonna unpack that a little bit more, and I'm curious on your views in how it is reshaping the way oversight and decision making is happening from, let's say, the CFO office, especially in the context of the regulatory environment, where we know that it's prompting regulators, AI is prompting regulators in the financial services sector worldwide to establish new guidelines to ensure responsible usage, right? So, for instance, for instance, in the U.S., you have federal initiatives, right? In December, I think 24, this past year, the U.S. Department of Treasury releases a report emphasizing the need for financial institutions to review all the AI applications, right? And then we also have, for instance, the AI Act in the EU, which has introduced Artificial Intelligence Act, this comprehensive framework that's aiming to uphold ethical AI practices. So I'm curious, in your practice and the work you and the team are doing with customers, how do you see that reshaping the way they think about this oversight inside the business?
Let's have a conversation about this, but I'd like to think the greater sensitivity around AI, which requires regulation um, and lawmakers' involvement, is because of several things. The first thing is the fact that for lack of a better term, like AI hallucinations, right? People rely more and more about AI, but AI doesn't tell you when it's lie, and it can lie pretty well. The other thing is that the impact on privacy, right? What what kind of data do you use to train AI, and then what kind of question you can ask AI which can harm someone's privacy. I'd like to think, and again, our use case is very, very different. We're using AI to serve enterprises to check the integrity and completeness of their financial data. The data is trained, the models are trained based on their own data, and we have heuristics that controls the insights that we're generating. So I'd like to think in our very specific use case, there are no hallucinations, there are no false positive, and everything is really, really tailored towards the ability to use your historical data to vet your data. So it's very, very different than other AI use cases where in Gen AI, it can really go all kind of places. Our use case, that's what I was trying to say. In the use case of being able to use AI to check the validity and compliance of your financial data, see, what is the challenge? So if I take a step back, think about a public company. The regulator requires you as a public company to sign a certification on a quarterly basis, the CEO and the CFO, that you've created an internal controls over financial reporting. The need to create internal controls have all kind of elements. One of the elements is the data. However, today, the data in the office of the CFO is spread across many disparate systems. It could be CRM, billing, the ERP, HRIS, payroll, payments, T&E. How can you check that? Now, in a large company, you've got to have, sometimes you have millions of transactions just in your order to cash process. How can you get your arms around that? I'd like to think the use case we've been able to identify where you use AI to validate and substantiate your data for compliance purposes, for data integrity purposes, because you want to trust your data, and for leakage purposes, because financial data is money, is a great use case where we are not impacted by the downside of AI, but from the other hand, we benefit from the scale of AI and from the ability of AI to help you validate 90% and then the other 10% we can use human beings, but we don't force them to manually validate 100% like they're doing today. So that's, I think, a very unique use case, which is very different than everything that is happening in AI right now.
What about the cultural side of things? Do you see the tenure staff resistance to change, or especially as AI is threatening, perhaps in some cases, job security or that transformation that businesses are going through?
I'd like to think on the light side, I am using that example. It's like coming to you 80 years ago and offering you an electronic calculator instead of your abacus, right? It's like, who would resist that, right? Right? The idea is that today there's so much work which is tedious. People don't even get to do everything they can do. The interesting thing about what we do in financial data integrity and compliance is that I'd like to think that we are helping you on multiple fronts. I'd like to think in many instances, you can't do everything the machine does today. So from a coverage standpoint, from like getting all your arms around the data, if you have a company, we have many customers who have, like, let's say, millions of transactions every month. You don't want to put bodies on that problem. It's not a good use of people time. It's not a fun job, right? That's the one thing. The other thing is the ability to identify everything in real time. So I'd like to think people understand that they want to do strategic things as opposed to being able to reconcile data across systems in real time in millions of transactions. It's not just doable. So I'd like to think it's the same way we've used automation. No one wants to go to the days before ERP where you will capture all your data on spreadsheets or like real ledgers, right? It's the same thing. So people get that. So I'd like to think again, also from that use, from the very specific use case we're solving for. No one wants to go back and do manual work around that.
Ahikam, this is really, really good, right? Because you're right. Like, we're a publicly traded company. You're talking about quarter-to-quarter filings. Mario knows that quite well, as he's involved with the team doing that. I just think about specific stories and use cases, and while all of this sounds effective and frankly every company needs, do you have specific customer stories? You don't have to name names, but to share the value they've gotten out of an approach like this with your technology, and how was their journey in adopting it? I'm sure in some cases there may be some resistance at first, but as they saw the value, what impact did it have in their business?
I'd like to think finance teams. And by the way, one thing I missed about your question, Mario, we do see now over the last few months, we do see finance teams looking to deploy AI in a use case which is very, something we've never seen before. I think it started after DeepSeek, but we are seeing people, we even heard that finance teams are targeted, one of the goals for 2025, and that's how they're compensated or rewarded, is to identify use case for automation or AI, which is super interesting. And again, that's why I think our use case is very interesting and it's very relevant because it's almost like risk-free. In fact, we actually reduce your risk. It's not like where you automate part of your accounting or something like that. So talking about a use case, very specific use case, we have one customer, for example, a very large business, software business, growing probably 40, 50% year over year. And part of their business is transact through a couple of marketplaces, enterprise marketplaces. And they have different pricing tiers from the marketplace for each transaction. Now, they process maybe, let's say, 5,000 transactions a quarter, maybe a few thousand transactions every month. Trying to validate and check and vet the pricing by the marketplace, the fees that the marketplace charge for each transaction on a manual basis in real time. We fully automated that process. So we agreed on the set of controls that should run and the work paper and the reconciliation. We completely automated a work that was done by person part-time on checking each and every transaction between the marketplace and his billing system and his ERP. We fully automated that. So we constantly check the data across these three systems. We check the pricing and whether that pricing that the marketplace charged was the appropriate pricing. We automate all the work paper around that. And that process now is fully automated, so they can see the full reconciliation of their marketplace business on a daily basis. They know it's checked. They know that all the anomalies are flagged because systems or people can make mistakes, and that's it. And they just focus on remediation, if any, as opposed to let's download data from Swiss systems, let's run VLOOKUPs, let's put it on a spreadsheet. And by the way, you need to do it week over week.
One of the things too that we certainly have seen in the market is in-house expertise around this. And it's, as you said, like what's the decision to integrate data or to arrive at a rich data catalog that you can then build from? What approaches do you see working in the context of governance of data? Do you think many folks still need to just understand the problem space better, or are they immediately trusting and saying automation can help us implement the governance strategy to help curate the data and qualify the data?
If I may, I would cling to higher windows. Gartner said that the number one priority, they published that paper a couple of months ago, the number one priority for CFOs in 2025, you can Google it up, is to worry about and take care of the data and analytics governance because the data is murky. 20 years ago, we thought that we'll have one big system called ERP and that ERP would take care of everything. That didn't happen, right? And today, I even remember one of the claims to fame of ERPs were like the procurement, right? The procurement side, maybe they call it like the purchasing side. Now you use solutions like Zip or Coupa just for that, right? So we're in a situation where every segment in the company is buying a software which is kind of a best for breed for him. And then how do you run compliance across all of that? I'd like to think that today it's impossible to manage data governance manually. It's purely impossible. And on top of that, to make it even worse, you have 2 or 3 other challenges. The first challenge is the inability of accountants to deal with data issues. They're not data experts, right? So it's almost like you have an issue with your house plumbing. What do you do with that, right? You can turn on and off the water, but you can't fix your plumbing. And I'd like to think that we help bridge that gap between the accountant's ability to touch the raw data and the need their need to sign off on that data for compliance and for data integrity purposes. That's one challenge. The other challenge, so the one challenge is like that talent gap, that capability gap, because accountants are not like data experts. The other gap is accountant shortage. If you Google Bloomberg accountant shortage, hundreds of thousands of people abandoning their profession. You have like a serious talent shortage, which force you to automation. So I'd like to think that the combination of the inability of the office of the CFO to be able to check the data because it's complex, and the fact that you have talent shortage. Another fact is that you have increasing compliance requirements that over time, for example, when a company goes public today, they're subject to a part of Sarbanes-Oxley called 404A. When they move from 404A to 404B, you have to meet tougher data governance and overall internal control governance demand. By the way, for example, I just saw recently in Europe, for example, in the UK, starting 2025, it's becoming so important. Every board member of a company needs to sign off on internal controls. So unlike in the US where it's just the CEO and CFO, in the UK, it's like every board member. So I'd like to think the compliance requirement around data governance, around the ability to be able to trust your data and manage that data across all the disparate systems, it's only going to increase. And we can't do it manually today. It's just impossible. So there's no other way, I think. By the way, I don't know if you guys have heard, 4 months ago, you can Google that. A great company like Macy's, right? Great company like Macy's, they announced that they're suspending their earning release because of an accounting error. Now, you're the CFO of a great company like Macy's. Yeah, I'm sure he's a great guy. Actually, he heard great things. What amazing about what they disclosed was it was the failure of a single person in finance. How can you, as a large company CFO, be able to monitor all the transaction, all the data, all the activity by people if you don't use automation? And because of that single person error, which again, you can Google that story, it's from November, they had to suspend their earning release, restate their financials. I'm sure there will be legal costs and all of that. But from the other hand, you have to trust your team and your people. And maybe they want to trust themselves, but they can't because there's so much data and there's so many systems. That's why I think the same concept that happened in software development as we started with quality automation, and the same patterns that happened in payment fraud prevention, where you moved from manual work to fully automated systems that vet each and every payment, we should move to a fully automated platform that vets all the enterprise financial data.
Wow, these are great examples and great stories, Ahikam, and it's clear, right? Like eventually every organization, every finance organization, finance team has to go this way because data is not going to stop. It's just, as a healthy growing organization, we'll keep getting more data, there's more requirements, and there's more, frankly, accountability needed.
Shift Happens Podcast. Shift Happens Podcast.
Before we wrap up, right, just thinking of what's coming, but for today, what advice do you have for business and technical leaders, especially in finance organizations, that they should do right now? Like if you can give 2 or 3 tips so that they can future-proof their financial operations and really maximize technologies like AI.
I'd like to think that when you run a large business, then everything that has to do with details, like reviewing transactions, reviewing documents, we should aspire to fully automate that between the next 12 to 24 months. We have, for example, a feature or a module that helps you validate data from documents between your digital data and your supporting documents, because today people are doing it manually. We have to transition from manual review of documentation, whether it's like purchase orders or whether it's invoices, so go ahead, expenses, T&E, we have that, or whether it's order forms to automation. I don't think you want to delay that. I think the reason you want to do that is because people can make mistakes, they're error prone. I think people don't like to do these jobs, and because you can get way more efficient, you can become way more efficient and way more accurate using. So I think they're like low-hanging fruits, like document validation, like transaction validation, uh, uh, um, that you can do with AI. There's another thing I'd like for people maybe to consider. I'd like to think that the increased availability of AI can cause much more fraud in the enterprise. Today, a guy can sit with a machine and, be able to generate fake invoices, fake documentation, and that could look really persuasive. So I think the need of the enterprise, which is, by the way, it's mandated by law. So the same law, the same Sarbanes-Oxley we talked about that requires you to apply internal controls, it requires you to protect yourself from fraud. And by the way, according to the law, according to Sarbanes-Oxley, if you ran into fraud, there's no materiality level. You have to disclose it at any level, even if it's $100, to your board and audit committee. So I think the need to use AI to protect yourself from fraudulent activity, whether it's internal or external in the enterprise, should increase. And obviously, we need to use automation for that. And we solved some of that as well.
Well said. So Doug, I've learned a lot, and one of the takeaways here is also that if we enable and think about the reuse and efficiency of AI, we should make sure that we only will get the performance and trustworthiness of all of the AI if we're ensuring that the appropriate gates and controls are followed during the AI lifecycle. So it sounds like the work that Ahikam is doing with the team at Safebooks, and even some of the work that we do here at AvePoint, really is helping organizations consider what are those gates and controls that should really be part of that AI lifecycle. So this has been a great chat. Appreciate the time.
Thank you so much, Ahikam.
Thank you so much, Dax and Mario. Talk to you soon. Take care. Thank you for having me.
Shift Happens Podcast.
That concludes today's episode with Ahikam. My takeaway: automation's here and it's changing how businesses stay secure and compliant. Leveraging AI and machine learning will aid businesses in efficiently meeting regulatory requirements and proactively identifying and mitigating risks before they escalate into costly issues. And if you're eager to future-proof your finances, the time to act is right now. If you like today's episode, hit subscribe, leave a review, and share the podcast with your peers and colleagues. Until the next time.